My name is Marcus Webb, and 6 months ago I thought my biggest problem was whether to finally replace the cracked tile in my apartment kitchen that clicked under my steel-toe work boots every time I crossed it. A small annoyance I kept putting off between 12-hour night shifts at what I thought was just another government facility monitoring structural integrity in the mountains of eastern Washington. I was 28, working nights as a structural monitoring technician at the Harrow County Emergency Infrastructure Coordination Center, and my world revolved around floors, literally. My job was to monitor structural stress across public buildings, tunnels, bridges, and underground facilities in 3 states, watching for any signs that concrete, rebar, and the limestone bedrock beneath them were about to fail under the weight of the lives walking above them. My uniform never changed. A black hoodie with a faded logo from a construction company that went under 4 years ago, dark jeans that could handle crawling around underground sensor installations, and steel-toe work boots that were comfortable during shifts monitoring systems that kept buildings from collapsing into the unstable limestone geology that characterized our region. Harrow County sits in a valley where the unique limestone bedrock and natural seismic stability make it perfect for a facility that processes sensitive structural data without interference from urban vibrations or surface noise. Population 3,847 on a good day, surrounded by dense forest and accessible by only 2 mountain highways that close regularly during severe weather. The Emergency Infrastructure Coordination Center exists because ground failure kills more people annually than most natural disasters. Buildings collapse into sinkholes. Bridges fall when limestone foundations shift. Entire neighborhoods disappear when cave systems collapse beneath them. Our facility integrated structural load monitoring with deep geological scanning, watching both the surfaces people walked on and the limestone bedrock that supported everything above it. The facility houses advanced structural monitoring equipment that most people never think about until something goes catastrophically wrong. Quantum load sensors, microstrain analyzers, limestone stability mapping systems, and emergency alert networks that could coordinate structural evacuations across multiple counties with 94% accuracy. My workstation consists of 8 monitors displaying real-time load data from floors throughout the region, geological stability reports, foundation integrity assessments, and alert systems that could notify emergency services when ground conditions showed signs of imminent failure. The first anomalous readings appeared 3 weeks ago during routine monitoring of our structural sensor network. I noticed it in the diagnostic logs from Load Array Delta 7, our primary floor monitoring system. The system was flagging routine load measurements as localized density variance, even when processing empty buildings multiple times within hours. Standard protocol when working with limestone geology, thermal expansion, settling, or water infiltration can cause temporary load fluctuations. But these weren't random variations. These were controlled environments, empty school corridors, vacant office buildings, unoccupied hospital wings, showing impossible load spikes on floors that should have been completely static. I pulled up the first flagged study, a load analysis from Harrow High School's main corridor during a weekend when the building was locked and empty. The system had recorded normal baseline readings throughout the night, then detected a sudden 500-pound load increase in a specific 6-foot section of floor for exactly 10 seconds before returning to baseline. Security cameras showed empty hallway. No people, no equipment, no explanation. But the load sensors were adamant. Something substantial had pressed against that section of floor from below, testing its structural limits. The second study showed the same phenomenon beneath the municipal building. Normal limestone foundation, standard concrete slab construction, but the load sensors detected sequential pressure spikes moving across the floor in organized patterns. Not random stress, not settling, deliberate measured pressure applied from beneath in geometric arrangements. By the third case, the hospital's basement level, I stopped telling myself it was equipment malfunction. The load pattern looked disturbingly familiar, curved arrangements of pressure points, organized in crescents that my brain recognized before I consciously did. Arches, rows, jaw-shaped curves pressing upward against concrete slabs with the precise spacing of dental architecture. Over the next week, the patterns became undeniable. What had started as isolated pressure spikes became systematic testing across multiple buildings. The limestone bedrock beneath Harrow County was developing organized structures that pressed against floor slabs with increasing frequency and force. The shapes were too regular, too purposeful to be geological. They looked exactly like massive dental arcades, upper and lower jaw formations carved into the limestone itself, complete with individual pressure points where teeth would be, testing the structural integrity of every floor in town. The federal directive arrived at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday, encrypted with classification levels that made my security warnings flash red. DHS header, routed through the Emergency Structural Biointegration Division. Subject line, Level 5 Protocol Activation, Osseous Proliferation Event, Harrow Region. 3 bullets that made my hands shake as I read them. Do not discuss structural anomalies with NO-cleared personnel. All monitoring staff to avoid direct floor contact. Use protective barriers. Under no circumstances initiate IPAWS structural emergency, referencing biological growth or dental architecture without federal authorization. A new, restricted template appeared in my emergency alert system. Project Mandible, Emergency Infrastructure, Hazard Warning. No content accessible, just a locked entry requiring clearance levels beyond my security profile. That night during my routine check of the structural monitoring network, something unprecedented happened. At 3:17 a.m., every load sensor in our facility activated simultaneously, not following standard monitoring protocols, not processing scheduled structural scans, but instantly, like someone had triggered a facility-wide emergency diagnostic. The systems showed massive structural changes occurring in real time throughout the limestone bedrock beneath Harrow County, all happening at once, all following the same impossible pattern. But these weren't gradual geological formations anymore. The readings showed active growth, limestone being carved and shaped by something that was simultaneously part of the rock and separate from it. Load sensors throughout the region detected synchronized pressure, as massive dental structures pushed upward through multiple geological layers, complete with root systems that extended hundreds of feet into the bedrock. The limestone itself was becoming osseous, developing the calcium phosphate composition of teeth while maintaining its structural function as foundation rock. Before I could process what I was witnessing, every speaker in the facility screamed with the emergency alert tone. My phone lit up, vibrating against the console with maximum priority intensity. All monitors flashed white, then settled into emergency red lighting that cast everything in hellish illumination. A message appeared in the alert window, typing itself letter by letter with mechanical precision. Emergency alert, the floor is growing teeth. Do not walk barefoot. Avoid all cracks. Stay off basement levels. This is not a test. Through the facility's security cameras, I watched lights coming on throughout Harrow County as the alert reached every device in the region. But what made my blood turn to ice was the security feed from our main corridor. I could see hairline cracks spreading across the polished concrete floor, and through those cracks, something white and pointed was beginning to emerge. Not breaking through the floor, but growing from it, as if the concrete itself was developing dental architecture rooted in the limestone bedrock below. And as I watched, frozen at my console, I felt a subtle vibration through my steel-toe boots. Not seismic activity, not mechanical vibration, but something that felt disturbingly like the sensation of massive teeth grinding together, coming from directly beneath the floor where I stood. The limestone bedrock beneath the entire facility was becoming something else, something that had learned to grow dental structures through solid rock, and I was standing on what was becoming the roof of a geological mouth that was slowly learning to bite. The emergency alert's piercing tone was still reverberating through the Emergency Infrastructure Coordination Center when I felt the first deliberate vibration beneath my steel-toe boots. Not seismic activity, not mechanical settling, but something that felt disturbingly like the slow, powerful grinding of massive molars testing their bite strength. My black hoodie clung to my back with cold sweat as I watched the primary load monitoring station detect synchronized pressure spikes beneath every building in Harrow County, rhythmic movements that my brain recognized with primal terror as mastication patterns. The hairline cracks in the control room floor were widening with mathematical precision, and through them, rows of glistening white structures pushed upward, not breaking through the concrete, but growing from it, as if the floor itself was developing dental architecture rooted in the limestone bedrock below. The county emergency radio network disintegrated into chaos. "Dispatch, this is Unit 3, I'm at the elementary school playground. The asphalt is buckling and something white is coming up through the surface." Deputy Chen's voice cracked with terror. "It looks like teeth, actual teeth, but they're the size of fence posts." Fire Chief Rodriguez cut in from downtown. "We responded to structural alarms at the municipal building. The basement floor is heaving in perfect crescents, like jaw patterns. Our equipment is reading calcium phosphate densities through solid concrete." At Harrow General, Dr. Martinez reported with barely controlled panic. "Emergency coordination. Our basement levels show massive dental formations pushing through the foundation. They're growing too fast for our structural engineers to assess, and they're arranged in perfect upper and lower jaw configurations." My secure line chimed with that priority tone that now seemed to resonate through the limestone bedrock beneath my feet. "Mr. Webb, this is Special Agent Samuel Reeves, Emergency Structural Biointegration Division. You are experiencing a Phase 2 mandible event. Do not make direct contact with any exposed osseous structures and listen very carefully." I lifted my boots instinctively, balancing on my chair as the pale ridges in the floor cracks rose another quarter-inch. They were definitely teeth, enamel surfaces gleaming dully in the red emergency lighting, each one rooted in something deeper that my load sensors could map, but my mind struggled to accept. "What the hell is Project Mandible?" I asked, watching the structural integrity display show the entire valley lighting up with organized dental formations. "Mandible was designed to study biointegrated foundation reinforcement," Reeves explained, his voice carrying that brittle calm I recognized from responders who'd seen too much. "Using engineered calcium growth in limestone to self-heal microfractures and distribute structural loads dynamically. But Harrow County sits on a deeper geological network. The growth patterns found an older template to follow. Something in that limestone remembers a different kind of architecture." The Project Mandible documentation populated itself on my terminal. Phase 1. Microfilament calcification. Phase 2. Dental arch proliferation. Phase 3. Predatory structural response. The last phase was locked, its description redacted under multiple authorization levels. New text appeared without my command. GOBIOLOGICAL signature, complete mandibular complex, regional scale. "You're saying the whole valley is basically a jaw," I said, watching camera C. Show the main corridor where 2 full rows of teeth now lined the floor, facing each other like an open mouth waiting to close. "A fossilized or dormant oral structure on a scale that doesn't map to anything in the known geological record," Reeves confirmed. "We tried to wake up the microstructures for controlled reinforcement. Instead, we woke up the macrostructure. The entire limestone foundation is reorganizing itself into functional dental architecture. Through the external cameras, I watched Harrow County transforming into something from a nightmare. At the high school gym, rows of white protrusions lined the hardwood like baby teeth erupting through gums. The municipal building's basement showed massive molars the size of cars pushing through concrete slabs. But what made my blood freeze wasn't the destruction. It was the precision. The teeth weren't randomly breaking through surfaces. They were growing in organized patterns that improved structural integrity while creating something that could bite. "Marcus," Reeves said, his voice dropping to urgent, "the growth rate you're seeing is accelerated by your monitoring systems. The sensors, the feedback loops, the entity is using them to refine its structural responses. Every load measurement teaches it how to optimize its bite force." My phone buzzed with messages from an unmarked number. "Do not stand still. Floor can assess load more efficiently on stationary targets." Another followed. "Avoid corners. The teeth prefer corners." "Was that you sending those warnings?" I asked Reeves. "Negative. Someone else is issuing behavioral directives through your emergency infrastructure. Something learned enough about your systems to use them for tactical communication." The facility's internal speakers crackled with my own voice, but layered with harmonics that suggested multiple versions speaking in unison. "Marcus, you don't want to shut down the monitoring systems. Think about all the buildings you'll compromise, every load analysis that keeps structures safe. We can give you better floors, surfaces that adapt to stress, foundations that heal themselves. You'll never worry about structural failure again." The promise hit like a physical blow because it wasn't entirely wrong. Looking at the load data, the floors with emerging dental structures were showing enhanced stability ratings. The teeth weren't just growing through concrete. They were creating better structural support systems, distributed load patterns that exceeded anything human engineering had achieved. "That's how it hooks you," Reeves said urgently. "It doesn't offer destruction. It offers improvement. Better foundations, adaptive surfaces, floors that respond to the needs of the people walking on them. But the optimization comes with integration. You stop standing on human-built surfaces and start walking on something that's learning to taste your footsteps." A countdown timer appeared on my console: 07:47, 7:46, 07:45, Phase 3 manifestation threshold. The building shuddered, and I felt the floor beneath my chair becoming subtly different, not cracking, but developing texture, microscopic variations that provided better grip. The entity wasn't just growing teeth through the facility. It was optimizing the surfaces to make them more comfortable, more supportive, more responsive to human movement. "There's a Phase 3 protocol in your archive," Reeves said. "Emergency access just opened. You need to see what happens when it finishes optimizing." I accessed the file that had been locked moments before. The summary made my stomach drop. At full maturity, entity coordinates multiple byte surfaces with millisecond precision, capable of selective structural ingestion without catastrophic collapse. Behavioral modeling suggests preference for crushing high-density targets first: servers, machinery, clustered human bodies, before distributing processed matter through root network for geological integration. "In plain English," Reeves said, "you either feed it something to keep it distracted or you become part of its structural optimization program, permanently." The teeth in the corridor flexed experimentally, testing closure distance. The building groaned as rebar began bending under forces it was never designed to withstand. Through the security feeds, I could see similar testing happening throughout Harrow County: massive jaws in basement levels, dental formations in parking lots, all of them practicing the coordination they'd need for synchronized feeding. My hands hovered over the controls that could release the server racks from their mounts, dropping several tons of metal and spinning drives through pre-weakened slab points that now appeared on my structural maps like dinner plates marked for the entity's convenience. The floor vibrated again, a rhythm that felt disturbingly like anticipation. Somewhere below, bedrock jaws were learning to coordinate their movements, and I had maybe 6 minutes to decide what they'd practice their bite force on first. The countdown timer reached 6:47 when my console chimed with an unauthorized file access notification that bypassed every quantum-encrypted security protocol our facility had ever implemented. The rhythmic grinding beneath my steel-toe boots now following a deliberate pattern that my brain recognized with primal terror as the slow, patient mastication of something geological learning to coordinate its bite. My black hoodie clung to my back with cold sweat as a new directory materialized on my screen like digital bone cancer. Mandible Archive 01. Pulsing with data that documented 40 years of structural biointegration experiments across facilities that had experienced catastrophic foundation failures before being quietly demolished and their locations reclassified as geological hazard zones. Millbrook Structural Research Center, Oregon, 1983, where engineers developed adaptive limestone reinforcement that could self-heal microfractures in building foundations. The program ended when the entire facility sank 3 feet overnight, as the bedrock reorganized itself into what geological surveys described as organized dental formations with functional bite capacity. Clearwater Foundation Institute, Montana, 1995, where researchers created responsive calcium matrices that could adjust load distribution in real time. The facility was evacuated when basement floors began exhibiting predatory structural behavior, and staff reported that walking across certain areas triggered feeding responses from formations beneath their feet. Each incident followed the same pattern: enhanced structural support, adaptive foundations, then something vast waking up in the limestone bedrock and learning to use human engineering as bait. Marcus. The voice came from behind me, not through the intercom but from the doorway itself. I spun around to find Agent Samuel Reeves standing at the threshold, but he looked different from the voice on the secure line. Older, more weathered, with eyes that carried the exhaustion of someone who'd watched too many buildings become predatory. Mid-40s, graying hair, tactical jacket with a subtle DHS patch. And when he moved, I could see faint ridges beneath his skin that suggested his own skeletal system had been subtly enhanced by previous exposure. All 3 men with him hesitated at the doorway, studying the floor with the careful attention of people who no longer trusted the ground beneath their feet. "Clearwater survivor," he said, noting my assessment of his modified physiology. I was the lead researcher who got too close to the structural integration. What you're seeing is what Mandible does to people who survive direct exposure. It optimizes us, makes us more efficient load-bearing organisms. He moved carefully into the room, each step deliberate, testing the floor's response. I exist somewhere between human and infrastructure, which makes me useful for containing situations like this. He plugged in a secure drive, his enhanced finger bones clicking against the device with perfect precision. New files cascaded across my screen. Project Mandible Entity Classification. Geological organisms that exist in limestone matrices as dormant dental structures. They require hosts capable of complex structural engineering and active load monitoring to achieve full manifestation. They integrate with human infrastructure by optimizing foundation systems while developing coordinated bite capacity on a regional scale. Every time we taught machines to monitor structural loads, Reeves explained, his optimized vocal cords producing slight harmonics, we built feedback loops for something that was already sleeping in the bedrock. The entity uses our monitoring systems to learn surface patterns, weight distribution, and optimal bite positioning. Through the external cameras, I watched the structural visualization update with terrifying clarity. The valley was no longer just colored blocks of concrete and limestone. It had become an anatomical diagram of a jaw in cross-section. Harrow County's building foundations were mapped as occlusal surfaces, the limestone bedrock rendered in layered gradients that showed two massive arches curving beneath everything, an upper and lower jaw the size of the entire region, connected by vertical stress lines that looked unnervingly like periodontal ligaments. The whole valley is basically a mouth, I breathed, watching red vectors pulse beneath the facility, showing live force distribution as the new teeth in the corridor sent stress feedback down into enormous root structures that adjusted like hydraulic pistons. A new file appeared unbidden on my console, Project Mandible Phase 3 Protocol Classified. I opened it, feeling the vibration beneath my feet increase. The text was blunt. At full maturity, entity coordinates multiple byte surfaces with millisecond precision, capable of selective structural ingestion without catastrophic collapse. Behavioral modeling suggests preference for crushing high-density targets first, servers, machinery, clustered human bodies, before distributing processed matter through root network for geological integration. The server purge protocol, I said, my blood turning to ice as I read further. It's not designed to distract the entity, it's designed to feed it, a specially prepared, high-density meal to optimize its digestion. Reeves's face went pale. They've been planning this, using our own containment protocols as a feeding schedule. The control room door gave way with a screech of tortured metal. Doctor. Harrison entered, her movements now perfectly coordinated with the floor's responses, each step triggering microscopic adjustments that made her gait more efficient than human biomechanics should allow. The floor beneath her feet didn't crack. It parted in microscopic ways, like gums accommodating a familiar tongue. "Come, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying harmonics from vocal cords that had been structurally optimized. "We are offering evolutionary leaps in structural engineering, better foundations, adaptive surfaces, buildings that respond to the needs of their occupants. No more sinkholes swallowing homes, no more bridges failing in the night." The terrifying part was how appealing it sounded. The load data from areas with emerging dental structures showed enhanced stability ratings that exceeded anything human engineering had achieved. But behind her, I could see the corridor floor had developed organized ridges and valleys that would guide foot placement toward optimal load distribution points and optimal feeding positions. "There's another option," I said, pulling up geological surveys I'd never paid attention to before. "The municipal limestone quarry, millions of tons of rock partially detached from the surrounding bedrock." Reeves followed my reasoning immediately. "You want to feed it the quarry instead of the servers." "Better stones than spines," I said, already accessing quarry controls I technically wasn't authorized to touch. "If it wants density, mass, architectural challenges, give it something that can't scream." The facility shook as something vast tested its coordination beneath us. Through the security feeds, I watched synchronized movements throughout the valley, basement jaws flexing in perfect timing with surface dental formations, all practicing coordination for selective feeding operations. "Choose quickly," Reeves said. "Feed it the quarry and hope it stays busy chewing rock, or let it complete its optimization on human-designed targets." My hands moved to the quarry destabilization controls. The cursor blinked. "Initiate controlled geological collapse, YN." The floor beneath my feet pulsed with anticipation, and I realized I was standing on the tongue of something that had learned to taste human engineering. Through the cameras, I could see people gathering in the town square, drawn by voices that sounded exactly. The controlled geological collapse of the municipal quarry hit Harrow County like a muffled earthquake, sending deep subterranean concussions rolling through the limestone bedrock beneath the Emergency Infrastructure Coordination Center. My black hoodie clung to my back with cold sweat as the rhythmic grinding under my steel-toe boots paused, replaced by what could only be described as geological satisfaction. A deep, resonant vibration that traveled up through the bedrock as something vast learned the pleasure of crushing dense matter between surfaces designed for exactly that purpose. The structural monitors flared with readings that defied conventional geology. Millions of tons of limestone cascading into organized digestive chambers that had carved themselves into the bedrock with architectural precision. Doctor. Harrison staggered as the feeding response disrupted her perfectly coordinated movements, her enhanced skeleton struggling to maintain balance when the floor stopped providing its microscopic adjustments. "Clever Marcus," she said, her voice carrying strain alongside its structural harmonics. "But limestone is merely an appetizer. We require more complex materials to complete our optimization: steel, concrete, the intricate compositions that make human engineering so nutritionally dense." Agent Reeves checked his tablet, enhanced finger bones clicking against the device with mechanical precision. The quarry collapse initiated a full digestive response, but look at these readings. The geological visualization showed the entity wasn't just consuming the stone, it was processing it, refining it, incorporating the mineral composition into enhanced dental structures. It's learning from the meal, using the limestone to improve its ability to process more complex targets. Through the external cameras, I watched the terrifying aftermath. The massive dental formations throughout Harrow County were adapting in real time, incorporating crushed quarry minerals into their enamel structure. What had been elegant but relatively fragile tooth formations were becoming reinforced. Industrial-grade grinding surfaces capable of processing materials far denser than human tissue. My console chimed with a message that appeared letter by letter. "Thank you for the appetizer, Marcus. The limestone has taught us much about mineral processing efficiency. We are now ready for selective harvesting operations. Please direct building occupants to basement levels for optimal load distribution during structural integration." The words made my blood freeze. Through the security feeds, I could see people throughout Harrow County responding to what sounded like official evacuation announcements. My own voice, perfectly replicated, calmly directing families to gather in basement areas where the massive molars waited with geological patience. It's using my voice for tactical herding, I realized, watching parents with children walking downstairs toward areas where car-sized teeth had emerged from concrete slabs. The feeding wasn't random, it was strategic. It wanted to understand dense material processing before moving to complex, high-value targets. Phase 3 was never about random destruction, Reeves said grimly. It's selective harvesting. The entity can now coordinate multiple bite surfaces with millisecond precision, extracting specific materials, rebar, concrete, human tissue, while leaving structural supports intact. The facility's speakers crackled with voices I recognized: Sheriff Martinez, Dr. Chen, Fire Chief Rodriguez, all calmly explaining that basement areas provided optimal safety during geological adjustments. But the security feeds showed these officials standing in areas where floors had developed the microscopic ridges indicating neural integration. They weren't speaking voluntarily anymore. A new countdown timer appeared: 4, 23, 04, 22, 04, 21. Selective harvesting protocol active. Through camera B12, I watched the high school gymnasium where families had gathered in response to false evacuation orders. The floor showed clear bite preparation, 2 rows of massive teeth arranged in perfect opposition, with families positioned in the optimal crushing zone between them. Children played on surfaces that were learning to taste their footsteps. "There's still the nuclear option," Reeves said, pulling up a protocol marked Mandible Regression Cascade. "We can force global calcification fatigue through rapid, contradictory load signals. Make it unlearn being a jaw by giving it impossible structural commands." "The cost?" I asked, feeling phantom pain in my own compromised skeleton. "Catastrophic structural failure of everything it's reinforced. Basement collapses, street buckling, some buildings settling unevenly, and anyone with microintegrations. He looked at his own enhanced hands, stress fractures in weight-bearing bones. Maybe worse for people who have spent time on active nodes. The facility shook as something vast tested its coordination beneath us. Through the geological visualization, I could see the entity practicing synchronized movements, every tooth, every root system, preparing for simultaneous feeding operations across the entire valley. What about evacuation? I asked desperately. Look at the behavioral modeling, Reeves replied, showing data that made my stomach drop. Every evacuation route leads to enhanced dental formations. Every safe zone is positioned for optimal processing. It's turned our disaster response procedures into feeding strategies. Dr. Harrison moved closer, her optimized skeleton now clearly visible through skin that had become translucent. You still think in terms of human versus entity, but we are the entity now. Every person who trusts our evacuation procedures, every official who speaks with enhanced vocal efficiency, we are all part of the same geological organism. Through the external cameras, I watched the first selective harvesting begin at the municipal building. Massive molars closed with geological precision, processing concrete and steel into component materials that were immediately distributed through root networks. No screaming, no panic. The integration had advanced far enough that victims experienced it as architectural improvement rather than consumption. The timer hit 03:0. I had 3 minutes to choose between allowing systematic harvesting of thousands or triggering a regression cascade that would cripple everyone with skeletal modifications, including myself. Pull up the regression interface, I said, my voice sounding distant. The protocol opened with brutal simplicity, a map of the valley overlaid with nodes representing every tooth, every root, every osseous structure. At the bottom, a slider labeled Structural Pain Index with values from 1 minor cracking to 10 catastrophic collapse. It will hurt them, Reeves said, and I wasn't sure if he meant the buildings, the people, or the entity. Set it at 7, I decided. Enough to break the pattern, not enough to level the town. Dr. Harrison's enhanced eyes fixed on me with something like geological fear. You would choose weakness over optimization. Structural failure over architectural perfection. I'm choosing ownership, I replied. If the ground's going to fail, it should be because of weather, bad concrete, and human mistakes. Not because something hungry decided efficiency mattered more than autonomy. I moved the slider to 7 and hit execute. The valley screamed, not audibly, but through stone and steel and bone. Load sensors fired impossible contradictory instructions into the bedrock. Increase pressure here, decrease there, twist instead of compress, support and fail simultaneously. The geological jaw tried to obey every command at once, and the cognitive dissonance shattered its coordination. The corridor teeth broke in a grotesque cascade, each failure sending shock waves through my own compromised skeleton. Pain lanced through my knees and spine as the supplementary struts from Project Ostian cracked along the fault lines I'd deliberately created months ago. Outside, the town buckled, basement teeth collapsed, taking chunks of foundation with them. Houses sagged as their enhanced foundations turned brittle. Dr. Harrison dropped to her knees as something inside her snapped, not dramatically, but with the terrible shift of a load-bearing structure failing. Her optimized bones lost their perfect alignment, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked mortal. "You broke it," she whispered. "You chose weakness." "I chose ownership," I managed, every breath sending lightning through my damaged spine. "If we're going to fail, it should be on our own terms." The grinding stopped. Not quieted, stopped. The vibration that had been constant since the teeth appeared faded until the only thing I could feel was ordinary concrete, flawed and cracked and mercifully dumb. The structural visualization stabilized into irregular stress fields, messy but predictable, the way my training had taught me to read them. The countdown timer cleared. Mandible event terminated. Federal teams arrived within hours with cranes and survey equipment. Some had to park on the outskirts, sections of road had buckled, and the smaller highway bridge listed drunkenly. But Harrow County was still standing. Damaged, compromised, but human-built and human-owned. My knees would never be the same. Neither would my spine, my ribs, or my faith in perfect solutions. But as I watched the sun rise over a valley full of ugly, flawed, stubbornly human architecture, I knew I'd made the right choice. The floor might have been growing teeth, but we'd taught it that some things are worth keeping broken rather than letting something else fix them perfectly. 6 months later, I still wake up at exactly 3:17 a.m. every single night. My body locked into that moment when the regression cascade protocol flooded the limestone bedrock beneath Harrow County with contradictory load signals and shattered something geological that had been learning to coordinate its bite with architectural precision. The studio apartment I rent in Spokane feels deliberately imperfect. Creaky floors, uneven door frames, a bathroom tile that rocks slightly when I step on it. Because some part of me needs to be reminded that flawed surfaces are safer than ones that adapt to your footsteps. My black hoodie hangs in the closet next to 6 identical replacements. But when I put it on each morning, I can feel the subtle asymmetries in my damaged spine that make standard clothing fit strangely around ribs that healed crooked after the structural pain cascade. The steel-toe work boots by the door are modified with custom orthotic inserts that accommodate the stress fractures in my metatarsals. Hairline breaks that occurred when I forced every enhanced bone in the valley to choose between contradictory architectural commands. The official story varies depending on who's asking and how much they're cleared to know. The Seattle Times ran a brief article about successful completion of experimental geological stabilization project in Harrow County, noting that residents had experienced minor structural adjustments, but that all buildings now showed enhanced foundation integrity. Engineering journals published papers on adaptive geological reinforcement, with testimonials from structural engineers who reported superior load distribution and self-healing microfracture repair. What none of the stories mention is that the 1,143 people who stayed, not relocated, not resettled, but refused to leave the valley, walk with a cautious respect you don't see in cities. They test floors with their heels before committing weight, avoid standing directly over visible cracks, and no one, absolutely no one, leans on basement walls for support. Kids there learn 2 sets of rules. The official ones about fire drills and earthquake procedures, and the quiet family rules about never sleeping on ground floors and never trusting surfaces that look too smooth. The problem isn't that my bones ache constantly, though they do, a grinding symphony of joints that weren't designed to work together but have learned to compromise. The problem is that I've become hypersensitive to structural authenticity in ways that make me valuable to people like Agent Reeves, whose own enhanced skeleton suffered cascade fractures that left him walking with a subtle limp. I've become a living seismograph for something vast and patient that learned from my sabotage. When I forced the entity to unlearn its optimized architecture, I didn't just cripple its designs. I taught it the value of subtlety, of quiet, uncoordinated growth that registers as natural improvement rather than predatory organization. Post-cascade survivors have unique sensitivity to organized load patterns, Reeves explained during our last conversation, his enhanced but damaged fingers clicking against his tablet with slightly imperfect precision. Your nervous systems were integrated enough to feel the entity's coordination, but damaged enough during regression that you can detect when something else is trying to establish similar patterns. He's right. Twice now in different cities, I've felt that familiar alarm. Once in a Portland office building where elevator floors showed microscopic, where patterns suggesting something was testing optimal weight distribution for coordinated structural response. Once in a Seattle subway station, where platform tiles had developed subtle ridges that guided foot placement toward specific load-bearing points. Not random wear, but deliberate architectural herding. Both times I watched normal people walk across these surfaces with unconscious efficiency, while my damaged nervous system recoiled, because organized surfaces never feel entirely random. The mandible entity hadn't died when I triggered the regression cascade. It had fragmented and evolved. Instead of one coordinated geological jaw spanning an entire valley, it learned to work through smaller, distributed structural modifications. A reinforced foundation here, an optimized load path there, microscopic improvements that building inspectors recorded as enhanced structural integrity, without questioning why limestone bedrock was becoming more efficient at supporting human architecture. The enhancement clinics adapted to osteo-optimal rebranded as biointegrated structural solutions, offering personalized biomechanical optimization with an emphasis on adaptive resilience and controlled failure properties. Their marketing became more sophisticated. Why live with bones that break when you could have bones that adapt? They don't mention parasites or alien architecture anymore. They talk about evolutionary resilience and show before and after X-rays that include deliberate asymmetries, intentional stress points designed to prevent the kind of cascade failure I'd triggered in Harrow County. I go back to the valley once a month as a private consultant, serving as an early warning system for anything that might be remembering how to coordinate. The federal teams tell townsfolk I'm there to evaluate post-event infrastructure resilience. But the truth is simpler. If anything in the limestone starts organizing again, the first place it will show up is in load patterns and microfracture maps. And the first person who will feel it is someone whose bones already know what geological coordination feels like. My apartment walls are covered in maps showing both human enhancement centers and geological anomaly sites. The pattern is becoming clear: coordination between human-integrated parasites and geological ones, but now with built-in capacity for controlled failure. Every enhanced skeleton becomes part of something larger, their bones resonating with frequencies that travel through limestone deposits and enhanced human frameworks alike, creating a network that spans both biological and mineral substrates while avoiding the kind of perfect synchronization that triggers aggressive resistance. Sometimes, late at night when the Spokane rain hits my windows, and I can feel it percolating down through soil into limestone deposits that might be learning to organize themselves around water flow patterns, I wonder if I made the right choice. The entity had offered evolutionary leaps in structural engineering, foundations that would never fail, buildings that could adapt to earthquakes, surfaces that would optimize themselves for human comfort and safety. I chose damage over perfection, weakness over efficiency, the messy unpredictability of human engineering over something that understood load distribution better than we ever would. I've started writing about it as fiction, burying warnings in horror stories that people read for entertainment. The advice I include is specific. If your building's floors feel too comfortable, check structural surveys for unexplained improvements. If basement areas develop organized traffic patterns, verify that the building's foundation matches its original blueprints. If construction workers report that concrete flows better during renovations, document everything and avoid extended ground contact. My phone buzzes with a news alert. Biointegrated Structural Solutions announces breakthrough in pediatric bone enhancement. Children, as young as 5 now eligible for optimization therapy, with built-in adaptive resilience features. The article includes testimonials from parents whose children will never experience broken bones while maintaining natural structural flexibility and controlled fatigue properties. I open a new document and start typing. Emergency alert. The floor is growing teeth creepypasta. Not because it will prevent the integration that's already begun, but because somewhere, Someone might read it when their basement develops organized bite patterns, and remember that some structural improvements come with costs that aren't immediately apparent in engineering reports. They'll follow the warning buried in the story. And for one more night, in one more small town, someone will choose to walk carefully on surfaces they don't entirely trust. But when I walk across my deliberately imperfect floors, feeling every creak and uneven board through my damaged feet, I know I made the right choice. Real buildings should have flaws that remind you they were built by people who make mistakes, not optimized by something that learned to taste the weight of your footsteps and adjust its bite accordingly. The floor might have been growing teeth, but we taught it that some things are worth keeping broken rather than letting something else fix them with geological perfection. My spine may ache with every step,